The world needs heroes. Individuals with the drive and talent to rise above all others. Using sheer force of will to change what's possible. But at Swift, we know every success story has a team behind the scenes. Because for the last 50 years, we've been supporting your success stories, keeping the world connected across more than 200 countries, delivering with excellence built on trust, giving you the latest tools to make transactions instant and frictionless, helping value flow where it's needed, and innovating as technology and society changes. We're making finance a simple, seamless, and standardized part of our lives, and keeping complexity behind the scenes. So whatever your next challenge, we'll be here for you. Whether that's financing global enterprise or helping small businesses thrive. Because with best-in-class infrastructure, we are your support team, helping you achieve the heroics that move our industry forward. Swift, shaping the future of finance together.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to this session on instant payments and building a secure and interoperable future. My name is Cian, and I'm Head of Transformation and Partnerships at Swift. And with me today, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Neil Anderson, who's Head of Core Payments Product Europe at HSBC. Neil, thank you for joining us today. Could you kick us off by telling us about your background, your current role at HSBC, the markets you operate in, and the clients you serve?
Sure, Cian. Thanks, and thanks everyone that's joined the session. A bit about me and my background. I've been in the transactional banking world for a little over 20 years now. My previous role to this one being in South Africa, heading up the global payment solutions business for HSBC, before moving to my current role about 4 years ago, which is based in the UK. I'm the head of core payment product in Europe for global payment solutions in HSBC, and for the purposes of this discussion, that means my remit covers the SEPA product delivery for our corporate and financial institution clients. When I took this role about 4 years ago, I thought I came from a complex environment, and I did, but the European payments landscape continues to be both challenging and exciting to me, and in particular SEPA, which is of course a domestic type scheme with a domestic product, but operating in many ways in a cross-border environment. We cover across Europe in many countries and are building out the SEPA INS capability in line with APR, which I'll cover a little bit later. But yeah, glad to be here talking about SEPA, the instant payment regulation, and the upcoming VIP services.
Thank you very much. And so, HSBC, it sounds like mainly in the corporates, serving corporates in terms of the business that you're involved in. Thanks. And look, before we get into the discussion to the audience, it's great to see many of you are joining us today in the LinkedIn live stream. Please do feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll answer a few of them at the end. So just setting the scene, international payments are reaching unprecedented speeds, fueled by advanced technologies, a sharper focus on customer needs. Major initiatives such as the G20 roadmap for cross-border payments are out there now. The G20 program focuses on driving cost, speed, transparency, and accessibility, setting targets for each of those for cross-border payments. Cross-border transactions that once took days are now completed in minutes, and in some domestic markets and Europe, instantly. In February 2024, this year, the European Commission passed a regulation promising to transform cross-border payments across the continent. The regulation mandates by October 2025, and that's the key date for everybody to remember. Payment providers must offer customers and SMEs, number one, fairly priced instant payments. Second of all, advanced screening. And third, relatively interestingly, the verification of payee checks, meaning institutions must confirm the name on the payment matches that of the beneficiary account via a verification of payee or VOP service. So Neil, how will the regulation impact HSBC's clients and the markets they operate in?
Thanks, Kid. Yeah, it's the IPR, as we call it, instant payment regulation, has many legs to it, including things like changes of limits, etc. but you've highlighted the key themes. So I'll go through each one of the items that you mentioned in a bit more detail.
Please.
The first one is the need for us, or the all participants, to be live on January 9th with our capability to receive instant payments within the Euro area or EU area. Now, this essentially means that each participant must receive a transaction as a SEPA INS and be able to credit their clients immediately. Following on from that, in October 9th, all in 2025, all participants must be able to submit SEPA INS transactions for their clients. In addition to this, we need to offer this across the same channels that we offer to our clients for SEPA payments and from the same account. So if it's a payment account as we define it for a SEPA transaction, the same would apply for a SEPA INS transactions. A few more elements to this, but the overarching requirement is to complete the journey from end to end, from submission of remitter to the crediting of the beneficiary within 10 seconds.
Right.
And all applicable checks and controls must be included in that 10 seconds. This is primarily to give clients a quick and complete experience. Now, from a retail perspective, the example I always give is buying a cup of coffee at a point of sale device. You don't want that experience to last more than a few seconds, and hence the focus on keeping that journey to a very short period of time. Ultimately, the regulation should increase the percentage of transactions that are utilized, or SEPA INS transactions that are utilized within the SEPA area. It ranges from about 15% here and there, and they're looking to increase that quite significantly with this regulation. That is one of the key drivers of the regulation. For pricing, as you mentioned, fairly, and in this case, the requirement is essentially for participants to not charge more for a SEPA INS transaction than they would for a normal SEPA transaction. And the way we define that is that at a per client level, we will not have a price point that has SEPA INS pricing exceeding. That's essentially how we define that requirement. Additionally, for VOP, when it comes to pricing, which we'll discuss shortly, all participants must offer that service free of charge at the initial check-in before a client chooses to submit the payment. The third one you mentioned was on advanced screening, and that also is requirement for January 9th, as is the pricing I just mentioned, and as two requirements which need to be met. And from a corporate client perspective, there shouldn't be significant change in experience, other than the intent of it is to reduce the rejection rate for cross-border SEPA INS transactions or transactions in Europe where we are seeing where there is a requirement to screen even inside the country. Time will tell whether this will be successful, but essentially that is the drive, and that's where corporate clients would see a benefit is in a reduction in the rejection rates, which are fairly high for SEPA INS given that it's a cross-border scheme. I won't go into too much detail with regards to the actual items themselves, but the overarching theme here is that participants are screening their client base and updated any changes as soon as possible, and that there is reduced screening in the actual transaction flow itself. So everything is taking place beforehand as opposed to in the transaction journey. There are limitations to that, of course, but across name screening and transaction screening, there are changes that need to be made by January 9th when it comes to sanction screening. And then lastly, as you mentioned, the verification of payee, and you defined it there as well. And that's a requirement from October 9th. And we will need to complete that journey within 5 seconds for one-by-one transactions, and needs to be done on an item-by-item basis. This is important for the use case I described above, when someone needs the experience to be fast, but potentially less so when a corporate is doing a payment to a beneficiary on a scheduled or non-time sensitive basis. It has some interesting parts to it as well in the VOP scheme. It's not just the validation part that comes with it, it's everything attached to it as well. Each time a client does a transaction, the requirement is that a VOP service is available. We also offer a batch VOP service to clients, as well as an opt-in or opt-out of that service for corporate clients as well. For a corporate client, I think in this particular case, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Potentially we might see certain corporates opting in to do bulk checks in the beginning of the month or an initial basis, and then opting out with a view to opting back in a periodic basis rather than going through the process every single time. which may affect their transactions. But nonetheless, as a participant, we must offer service from October 9th. So I hope that gives you a brief summary of the key elements of the instant payment regulation.
Thank you very much. And just to get those dates again, I think that the viewers will be quite keen on understanding what those dates were in terms of what's in January versus what's in October.
So January 9th is the ability for a participant to be able to receive a SEPA INS transaction across all countries where they currently offer SEPA credit transfers. It's also a requirement to change the pricing component, as I mentioned. And on January 9th, similarly, the sanctions changes that are required within the RPR are also required by January 9th. The key ones for October 9th is the outbound capability, similar to the inbound capability, but they're given more time for that, and the verification of payee service. Again, like I said, these other elements of the RPR, like reporting and so forth, that we could get into, but those are the main delivery items and the dates around them.
Okay, so January 2025 and October 2025. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the opt-out, that sounds interesting as well. Just a bit more detail on what is that opt-out option for the instant payment regulation? Does it apply to every participant, or is it specific?
So it's not really an opt-out for the participant itself. It's an opt-out that we need to provide to our clients, and the client can choose to opt out or opt in of the VOP service.
Of the VOP specifically. Okay.
Yeah, of the VOP specifically, yes.
Got it. Thank you. Well, just to add in for us here at Swift, one of the areas we're focusing on as well is the verification of payee pillar. And to give you some idea around why that's significant, it's estimated that operational payment errors cost the industry more than $2 billion each year due to incorrect or missing details in a payment. And incorrect beneficiary details are responsible for the majority of those errors, and they're called unable to apply payments. Verification of payee checks can help spot these errors before the payment is sent, saving significant time and money and avoiding those lengthy investigations. It's also quite useful in terms of verification of payee. It helps tackle some instances of fraud, and the one that's cited is around authorized push payment fraud. Just to give you some background on what the landscape looks like in Europe at the moment, several countries in Europe, including France, Italy, Portugal, UK, the Netherlands, already have their own systems to complete verification of payee checks on domestic transactions. And now there's many more in development due to these regulatory changes that you've just described. Can I ask you, Neil, to explain a bit more about how these systems work and the benefits they bring?
Sure. I mean, it's a straightforward flow, and it's something that a lot of people in the audience, especially those here in the UK, where I am, and other parts of the world, would have already experienced on their online banking channel in their own personal capacity when doing their banking and looking to make a payment. So, for example, when I use my online banking, say on the desktop or a mobile application to make a new payment, I will need to complete the beneficiary name and account details, and sometimes a secondary reference level of information. And as soon as I complete this, I'm able to prompt to check beneficiary name details. That's the prompt that comes up to us to select, otherwise known as confirmation of pay in the UK, but by different names elsewhere. And in Europe, as we know it as verification of payee or VOP, which essentially means that the information is shared with the beneficiary bank using API technology. And then the beneficiary bank will check the details and respond with a yes, full match, no match, or partial close, and provide the name of the beneficiary in those cases. Then I, as the person submitting, will make a decision, an informed decision, whether I'm satisfied that the payment is going to be to the intended recipient or not, and whether I want to proceed accordingly.
All right.
It may well be that I'd like to reach out to the beneficiary in case of a non-match or a partial match to recheck the details before progressing with the payment. And I think that's something, again, that comes into the corporate space is you want to reduce that issue of paying to the wrong beneficiary, wrong details, failure of transactions. If you can do that up front, it can certainly reduce the pain in terms of that cycle of the payables process. This is tightly integrated between the COP platform, the API connectivity, and so forth. And all this happens in a very short period of time. In the UK, it's 3.5 seconds. In the VOP, it's likely to be somewhere around 5 seconds based on the recent EPC scheme rulebook. But from a one-to-one basis, we expect that it'll actually be much faster than that. The benefits of this, of course, on a retail basis are fraud, right? The ability to see whether the beneficiary you're paying is actually the person you're supposed to be paying is obviously fantastic. But for corporate clients as well, it can save significant time and money in avoiding lengthy investigations around regards to incorrect payments and so forth. So it's really a win-win for both the bank as well as the customers, because a lot of these queries also come to the banks as well when funds are going to the incorrect place.
And might it be possible to talk a little bit about what HSBC is doing specifically around verification of payee, confirmation of payee, and the solution you have in place?
Yeah, we participate in these pre-validation schemes across the world where applicable and where required. And we, of course, are building the VIP requirements in Europe as well, and looking to work with partners to solve the requirements. But we've been building this capability in the cross-border space for quite some time to help our clients pre-validate beneficiaries where possible for any payments. And that's where tools like Swift Pre-Validate have played a significant role. If I explain pre-validate the way I just explained VAP, it's very, very similar. It gives you the opportunity to verify pay details prior to making the payment and ensuring that who you're paying is the right beneficiary that you're paying. So yeah, that's what we're doing on that particular side. Obviously, this operates in a non-mandatory space. The Swift Pre-Validate, the work we do around Swift Pre-Validate with Swift, whether it be beneficiary account validation or central bank account validation on the account side, is a non-mandatory space. But we see it as a key component of pre-validation across the globe, and where we want to get to with regards to providing our clients the ability to check the beneficiary beforehand. So domestic schemes, which are often driven by regulators and is very much in the VIP space, we participate and very actively participate in, but we're also looking to broaden that continuously, working with partners like Swift, for example, to in the non-mandatory space to help our clients pre-validate transactions.
So you're actually doing pre-validation already, and you do that in some domestic markets in Europe and also outside of Europe as well, even though there isn't a regulation there specifically.
Absolutely.
Okay. And what's your sense of the ability to leverage the domestic schemes that are already there today with the VOP requirement? As I mentioned, there's quite a few of them out there, but trying to interconnect them seems to be, something that would need to be done to be able to get the pan-European coverage.
Yeah. There are domestic types or VIP schemes operating across the continent, but there is a need for a linked up and interoperable solution, which would help with the efficiency. At the end of the day, this mass scale bilateral exchanges between participants is not a practical solution. It would be extremely cumbersome to obtain, very expensive, for example, as well. And I think you would really struggle to achieve 100% reachability. So yes, we're getting the directory service from the EPC, and you'll know who to connect to. But there is a definite need for something to be brought together with regards to how we connect up to all of these individual schemes across Europe, which are now propping up if they weren't there before, but are very much domestic focused as opposed to cross-border focused currently.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, definitely the pan-European solution is crucial for this instant payment regulation. And I wanted to say at Swift, we're working with the European banking community to address the fragmentation you describe on a solution to facilitate that interoperability between the existing domestic instant payment systems across Europe, creating a verification of pay that's a capability that spans the continent and hopefully beyond, because we want to go beyond Europe, although that is the priority for banks in Europe at the moment. As you mentioned, we already offer a payment pre-validation service, which is called Preval. And that serves as a good foundation for this, allowing individuals, corporates, banks, and other financial institutions to make API calls that confirm that payments data is correct before a transaction is sent. But we need to develop the solution further for the reasons you described to prepare institutions for the instant payment regulation. And maybe just to describe how we're doing that. Firstly, is to increase the data coverage across Europe. When we say data, we're talking about account and access to accounts, because that's the information that needs to be validated. And that's key. We need to source the data that banks will use to carry out those verification checks. And we're encouraging countries and institutions to work with us in achieving that data coverage across Europe. You also touched on the European Payments Council Verification of Payee scheme, which is quite a key part of the puzzle in terms of making sure that pan-European coverage exists, which allows banks as well. If you think of banks in countries that have a domestic scheme, they potentially have that ability already. In countries that don't have that capability or scheme, they need some other way to interface with the VOP requests. And the VOP scheme from the EPC actually allows this. And what we're going to do is SWIFT is going to provide connectivity to that scheme to ensure requests can be made to those banks as part of the European community. Before we start to bring ourselves into a close, I'd like to take a step back and look at this on a wider scale. Obviously the regulation is causing Europe to lead the way, but this could start to serve as an example for other regions in Europe. One of my favorite quotes from our compliance officer is that fraud does not stop at the border. And SWIFT is working across the globe to open new markets for cross-border verification of payee, focusing on key countries where the benefits will be felt most. Can I ask, Neil, how is a global company like HSBC preparing for this? And how do you foresee this topic panning out internationally in the future?
Well, like you said, Europe is maybe leading on the way in verification of payee, but some of these initiatives have been around for quite a period of time. Countries worldwide are adopting similar measures to enhance transaction efficiency and help prevent fraud. The most kind of recent example I can give is in Australia in 2023 that introduced the Scam Safe Accord, which mandates name verification for payment transfers, and developing a national COP or confirmation of pay system, which is there to combat fraud as well and misdirected payments. And we're very much part of that scheme as well. I've mentioned the UK as well, which is we've been participating in the COP scheme for some time, and continues to grow and is a very key component of fraud fighting in the country. I think these examples and where it's growing, such measures could provide a roadmap for other countries across Asia, Middle East, America, looking to adopt similar standards and strengthen their digital payment infrastructure. From our side, we keenly, participate where we can on any of these domestic schemes, like I mentioned. We believe the end goal should be to provide trusted pre-validation service to our clients as an option for as many of their payments as possible. And there won't be one solution, I don't believe, or one ultimate platform. There will be a requirement and is a requirement for entities and organizations to work together along with regulators to provide a service, pre-validation to corporates and normal retail clients across the world, to give them an opportunity to pre-validate their payments before they make them.
And do you see any challenges there? I'm thinking of things like data privacy in terms of when it goes outside of Europe.
Certainly there is. No, that's one of the bigger challenges that we face with these solutions, both inside and outside of Europe, in terms of that. So that where I mentioned not just industry players and participants working together, but regulators as well, to overcome these particular hurdles. I don't think you would get to 100% in terms of being able to provide pre-val services, but I think we could certainly get very close.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the areas that, as an organization, we at SWIFT are looking at is trying to make sure that we educate around the data privacy implications of cross-border verification of payee, because there are names are sensitive data and account details, and also then the liability model there as well for who's liable if there's an incorrect response and a payment is made to the wrong beneficiary. That's key to give that confidence to the different players and the different countries when they're actually sending requests to each other.
Yeah, and I think VIP a perfect example of that. Even within Europe, right? You need that clarity as an industry player to know, where does the liability sit in terms of responsibility in a scheme like this, and that can be, applied across the globe in terms of that. You need to have that surety when providing these services as well. That there's no grey area with regards to that.
And I think that is the big benefit of the EU regulation, because it very clearly states things like where the liability sits between the participants, and it actually, because it's within a single zone, it states very clearly the data privacy implications. So it makes the institutions much more confident in terms of actually carrying it out.
Absolutely.
I've got a couple of good questions from the audience here coming through already. Maybe we could finish up with a few of those. I'm just looking at one here now, which is, Neil, do you think these developments are due to the regulation, or was the industry already heading this way before the announcement?
Look, I think if in terms of the instant payment regulation, I think I don't think it was heading that way naturally. We have seen it slowly but surely go up in terms of the percentage of transactions that are going separate instant. But I think it needed this push from the regulator with regards to increasing the SEPA inst flow. So naturally, yes, but I think over a much longer time scale than perhaps they would have liked within the industry. And hence, I think this is just giving it that bit of a boost to actually accelerate the usage of SEPA inst within the Eurozone. There are some kind of natural reasons for that, and that's why they haven't simply come out and said everyone just go live. They've addressed certain features and issues such as sanction screening in an attempt to loosen up, or not loosen up, but try and address some of the issues that are preventing SEPA ints from going more broader. So it has been more of a full-scale scope with regards to trying to fix the existing issues that have prevented the growth, but also mandate that participants become members as well.
Yes, well, the adoption is much faster once it's mandated, right? And
Yes.
it goes through. I have a couple of other questions. I appreciate some of these are sort of quite open, so they you mightn't have a straight answer or be able to answer some of them, but I'll throw them your way anyway.
No problem.
One question is around to what extent does the instant payment regulation also apply to SEPA classic payments, SCT? That's from Gert Mignot.
So the way it applies is that they want the participants to offer SEPA inst in pretty much the exact same way that we offer SEPA today. So in the regulation, some of the things we've mentioned on this call is if you're offering SEPA in a country, you're now mandated to offer SEPA inst in that country. If you're offering it on any particular channel that you currently offer SEPA for, you now have to offer that on SEPA inst as well. If you have a payment account that is offering SEPA transactions, you now have to offer it on SEPA inst as well. If you're charging for a particular transaction for SEPA, it now needs to not, SEPA inst can't be more than that SEPA. So in terms of the implications for it, they've tried to mimic a situation where if you're offering SEPA for a client today, you now to give them the exact same experience to the extent possible for a SEPA inst transaction. So, ultimately, it will come down to consumers and corporates and so forth and clients making a decision about what they need. Ultimately, VIP service will also be for SEPA credit transactions as well. So that it really will be on the need of that particular person or corporate as to whether they need to do an immediate payment or one that is not immediate, and obviously these benefits to not immediate payments as well sometimes. But essentially, the experience should be the same in terms of your accessibility, how much you get charged, and whether you can do a SEPA inst or SEPA payment in any country through any participant.
I'm trying to think of some examples of where you would, if you can get an instant payment at the same price as a non-instant payment, what would be sort of examples of that? Would it be payroll or
Absolutely. Where you want to have a little bit of time before the actual beneficiary is credited. Now, you could argue that VOP services that are going along with it reduce that concern as well. But certainly, non-urgent payments sometimes have a benefit. But in many cases, people are looking for the instant option.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, we're coming up to time, and I want to make sure everybody can get back to what they need to do. So I'll wrap it up there and say thank you very much for the listeners, and thank you very much for your questions, and thank you, Neil, for joining me on this discussion. A lot more to discuss, and a lot yet still to come. So please stay tuned for what Swift do next on this topic. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.